The unexpected night. Sophia Carter glanced at the clock on her office wall. 10:17 p.m. The storm outside had only intensified in the last hour, turning the city streets into rivers. She let out a slow breath, rubbing her temples. She should have left earlier, but Nathan Hale, her boss, had needed last-minute revisions for an important client. Now, she was stranded. She tapped at her phone screen, scrolling through ride-hailing apps. Every option either showed no drivers available, or an estimated wait time of over an hour. She chewed the inside of her cheek. Ethan, her husband, had texted her an hour ago, asking if she'd be home soon. She had assured him she would. Now that was uncertain. A sharp knock at her office door made her jump. Nathan leaned against the frame, arms crossed over his chest. Even after a long workday, he looked effortlessly composed. Dark hair neatly styled, his charcoal gray suit crisp. There was an ease to the way he carried himself, a confidence that bordered on arrogance but never quite crossed the line. "Still here?" he asked. Sophia nodded. "I was about to leave, but the storm." He pulled out his phone, tapping at the screen before exhaling in mild frustration. "Traffic's a mess. I can't get a car either. Looks like we're stuck." Nathan's gaze flickered toward the window, where rain pounded against the glass in heavy sheets. After a moment, he turned back to her. "There's a hotel a few blocks away. It's better than waiting it out here." Sophia hesitated. "I don't know if that's a good idea." He tilted his head slightly. "It's practical. There's no way we're getting home anytime soon." She glanced at her phone again. No messages from Ethan. Maybe he had already gone to bed. Still, she hesitated. The thought of sharing a space with Nathan, even just a hotel lobby, felt like a step into something uncharted. After a pause, she sighed. "All right. Let's go." The wind was relentless as they stepped outside. Sophia's coat offered little protection against the cold, biting rain. Nathan walked ahead, his long strides purposeful, leading the way through the flooded streets. By the time they reached the hotel, her shoes were soaked, her hair damp. Inside, the warmth of the lobby was a relief. It was modern, sleek, marble floors, golden lighting, the quiet hum of a grand piano playing softly in the background. Nathan approached the front desk, speaking briefly with the concierge. Sophia stood a few steps behind, arms wrapped around herself. Then she heard it. "There's only one room available." Nathan's voice was level, but Sophia caught the tension beneath it. The receptionist nodded apologetically. "I'm afraid so, sir. The storm has left a lot of guests stranded." Sophia stepped forward. "Maybe I should just wait in the lobby." Nathan turned to her, shaking his head. "Sophia, that's ridiculous. It could be hours before the road's clear." She hesitated, glancing around the quiet, dimly lit space. The idea of sitting alone all night didn't appeal to her, but the alternative. Nathan seemed to read her mind. "It's a suite. Plenty of space. Separate rooms." His voice was even, but there was something unreadable in his expression. Sophia swallowed. "All right." The suite was luxurious, soft lighting, a fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. Sophia dropped her bag near the entrance, taking in the polished decor. True to Nathan's word, there were separate sleeping areas, divided by an open living space. Nathan loosened his tie, rolling his shoulders. "I'll order something to eat. You should change out of those wet clothes." She nodded, retreating to the bathroom. As she peeled off her damp blouse and skirt, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly tousled from the rain. She exhaled, pressing a hand to her chest. This was nothing. Just a night. Circumstantial. When she emerged, dressed in the oversized robe provided by the hotel, she found Nathan seated on the couch, 2 glasses of wine on the table between them. He looked up as she approached, studying her for a moment before gesturing to the empty seat beside him. "I figured we might as well make the best of the situation," he said. Sophia hesitated before sitting down. The fire crackled softly. She took the glass, swirling the deep red liquid before taking a sip. It was rich, warm, settling something restless inside her. Nathan leaned back, watching her. "Tell me something, Sophia. When was the last time you did something unexpected?" The question caught her off guard. She glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, voice lower now, "when was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to? Not because you had to." She frowned, staring into her glass. "I don't know." Nathan tilted his head. "That's a shame." Silence stretched between them. The storm outside roared on, but inside, there was only the sound of the fire and the faint clink of glass as she set hers down. Sophia felt something shift in the air. She told herself it was nothing. A line almost crossed. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows along the hotel suite's walls. The storm outside had not relented, and neither had the tension in the room. Sophia shifted slightly on the couch, acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her. His gaze was steady, unreadable, as he swirled the wine in his glass. "Strange how life works, isn't it?" he mused, voice low. "A single storm, and suddenly we're here, in a situation we never planned for." Sophia let out a quiet breath. "I doubt this is the worst inconvenience you've ever faced." Nathan smirked, but there was something tired behind it. "Not the worst. But definitely unexpected." She took another sip of wine, letting its warmth settle in her chest. There was a pull in the air between them, something neither of them acknowledged but both felt. A quiet understanding that whatever this was, it was dangerous. She should text Ethan. She should let him know she was safe. But her phone sat untouched on the table, screen dark. Instead, she found herself asking, "Are you happy, Nathan?" The question lingered between them. He exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair before leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I have everything I'm supposed to want," he said finally. "A successful career. A wife who looks perfect on paper. A life most people would envy." Sophia studied his profile, the sharp angles of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. "But..." Nathan let out a quiet laugh, devoid of humor. "But none of it feels real." He turned to face her then, his expression raw in a way she had never seen before. "And you? Are you happy, Sophia?" She opened her mouth, then hesitated. She could say yes. She could tell him that Ethan was a good man, that their marriage was stable, that she had no reason to feel anything other than content. But content wasn't the same as happy. Instead, she looked down at her hands. "I don't know anymore." The confession felt heavier than it should have. And from the way Nathan's gaze darkened, she knew he understood. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged. Then, slowly, deliberately, Nathan reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. It was the lightest of touches, but it sent a jolt up her spine. She didn't pull away. "You deserve more than uncertainty," he said quietly. Her breath hitched. She knew she should move, break whatever this was before it crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But she stayed. "Nathan." He shifted closer, the space between them vanishing. His cologne, clean, subtle, wrapped around her. His eyes searched hers, looking for something, waiting. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel the warmth of his breath now, the faint trace of wine on it. If she leaned in just a little more, their lips would touch. Then, her phone buzzed. The sound shattered the moment, jerking her back to reality. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as she reached for the device with shaking fingers. "Ethan, are you okay?" The words on the screen sent a wave of guilt crashing over her. She exhaled sharply, pulling her hand away from Nathan's. He didn't stop her. "I should." Her voice was unsteady. She cleared her throat. "I should answer this." Nathan leaned back, nodding once, though his jaw was tight. "Of course." She turned away, pressing the phone to her ear. Hey. Ethan's voice was groggy with sleep. Hey. Just wanted to check on you. She swallowed hard, gripping the armrest of the couch. I'm fine. The storm's bad, so I had to get a hotel room. I'll be home as soon as I can. There was a pause. Then, okay. Stay safe. I love you. Her throat tightened. I love you too. She ended the call and set the phone down. When she looked at Nathan, his expression was unreadable once again. Good night, Sophia, he said quietly. She nodded, rising to her feet and retreating to the other side of the suite. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she knew one thing for certain. Something between them had changed. And there was no undoing it. A secret left unspoken. Sophia woke to the sound of distant thunder, though the storm had mostly passed. The room was dimly lit by the grey light of morning filtering through the heavy hotel curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the memories of the previous night settled over her like a weight. The storm, the wine, the almost kiss. She turned her head, expecting to see Nathan still asleep in the suite's adjoining room, but he was already up, standing near the window, fully dressed in yesterday's suit. His tie was missing, and the top buttons of his shirt were undone, but he looked composed, as if nothing had happened. As if nothing had nearly happened. Morning, she said softly, sitting up and pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Nathan turned, his expression unreadable. Morning. He held out a coffee cup. I ordered room service. She hesitated before accepting it, fingers brushing his briefly. The touch was fleeting, but it still sent a pulse of something unspoken between them. She took a slow sip, letting the warmth settle inside her. We should head back soon, he said, glancing at his watch. The roads are clearing. Sophia nodded, though she wasn't sure if she was relieved or disappointed. She had spent the night convincing herself that nothing had happened, that nothing had changed. But as she sat there, coffee warming her hands, she knew better. Nathan moved to gather his things, his movements deliberate, careful. He was keeping his distance now. Last night, there had been a moment, an almost, but now he was retreating, locking it away as if it had never existed. Sophia wasn't sure whether to be grateful or frustrated. She cleared her throat. Nathan. He paused, glancing at her. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that would acknowledge the shift between them without making it worse. But what was there to say? That she had felt something real in that moment? That she had wanted to cross the line and wasn't sure whether she regretted stopping? Instead, she simply said, "Thank you. For everything." Nathan studied her for a long moment. Then, with the ghost of a smirk, he said, "Anytime." And that was it. The ride back was quiet. The car moved through the damp streets, the city still waking from the storm. Sophia watched the world pass through the rain-streaked window, her reflection staring back at her, pensive, conflicted. Nathan sat beside her, silent, his posture relaxed, but his fingers tapped against his knee, a subtle betrayal of his thoughts. She wanted to ask him if he regretted last night, if he had thought about what might have happened if the phone hadn't rung. But she already knew the answer. He would never say it out loud, and maybe that was for the best. As they neared the office, Nathan finally spoke. Last night. Sophia turned to him, pulse quickening. It never happened. His voice was calm, firm. She searched his face, trying to decipher the emotion behind those words. A part of her had expected him to say that. The other part, the part that still felt the warmth of his breath near hers, recoiled at the finality of it. But she nodded. Right. It never happened. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then looked away. Sophia stepped through the front door of her apartment, greeted by the scent of fresh coffee and the faint hum of the television. Ethan was in the kitchen, dressed casually, flipping through the morning news on his phone. Hey, he said, smiling as he set his mug down. Rough night. She forced a small smile. Yeah. The storm was worse than I expected. He walked over, pressing a kiss to her temple, his touch familiar, comforting. But as his arms wrapped around her, Sophia felt something strange. Distance. Not physical, but something deeper. She closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. He felt like home. He always had. But last night had introduced something new, something she hadn't even realized was missing. "Did you sleep okay?" Ethan asked, rubbing her back absent-mindedly. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second. "Yeah. Just glad to be home." He pulled back slightly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good." Sophia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The workday passed in a blur of emails and meetings, but the weight of the previous night never truly left her. Nathan barely acknowledged her beyond what was necessary. He was polite, professional. Exactly as he had always been. Exactly as if nothing had happened. By late afternoon, she found herself in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine. She didn't hear him approach until his voice broke the silence. "Long day." Sophia turned, meeting Nathan's gaze. His expression was neutral, but there was something in his eyes, an echo of the night before, buried but not forgotten. She nodded. "Yeah. You." He smirked slightly. "Always." A beat of silence stretched between them. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, Nathan turned and walked away, back to his office, back to his life. Sophia exhaled, gripping the edge of the counter. She had crossed no lines, yet everything felt different. Somewhere in the space between restraint and desire, a door had opened, a door neither of them would acknowledge, but one they both knew was there. And secrets, she realized, didn't have to be spoken to exist.